I guess Lisa doesn't need a corner office. She's already invisible, Vince snorted, not even looking in my direction. Laughter spilled from the Zoom room like flat soda, bubbly and bitter at the same time. I sat there with my camera on, fake smiling while clutching my coffee like it was the only thing tethering me to the earth. 12 years with this company, and I'd become the punchline to a Mant-Childs improv set. My office wasn't a closet. Used to be a supply room, sure, but after I took lead on the downtown acquisitions, I'd converted it, budgeted it, designed it, even painted it myself when facilities couldn't squeeze it in before Q4. But Vince, new VP of expansion, fresh from some startup that probably worshipped ping-pong tables and frat boy jargon, decided I was a prop. Dead weight in a blazer. The woman you mock because you don't dare challenge her directly. But here's the thing. Quiet doesn't mean weak, and buried doesn't mean gone. Hell, even fossils have teeth. Before we go further, quick thing, if this already sounds like the kind of office circus you've survived or are stuck in, hit the like button. Seriously, and maybe subscribe too, because 90% of y'all listen without doing either. It helps more than you know, and it tells my team to keep dropping stories like this. All right, back to Vince and his dumb smirk. Made the joke again a few minutes later, different flavor, same insult. We really should get Lisa an upgrade, he said while screen sharing my slide deck with his edits, but maybe she likes her cave. I watched one of the interns wince. Another tried to laugh and choked on their Red Bull. My name wasn't even in the footnotes anymore. Vince had done what men like him always do, show up late to the build, insult the scaffolding, then staple their name to the blueprint. Strutted around like he'd architected Slate Bridges' $80M leasing portfolio. As if he hadn't been brought in 6 months ago, after the hard parts were done. After the negotiations during COVID, after the tenant protections I'd baked into the lease renewals, after the board finally greenlit our expansion based on my projected returns. He had no idea where the power lines were buried. I didn't say anything on that call, just sipped, just watched, but something deep in me clicked like a safe unlocking. I started pulling files that night, quietly, carefully. I wasn't about to walk into HR or send some indignant email. I knew how they'd spin it. Let's all just move forward, try to have more collaborative energy. No, thank you, I wanted something permanent, structural. The kind of retaliation you don't hear until it's falling from the ceiling tiles. And Vince, he'd handed me the microphone. Mocking someone about their office while sitting on a lease he didn't understand? That was like throwing a match into a dark room full of gas cans. The thing is, I didn't just help negotiate those office spaces. I owned some of them. Well, on paper, I was the lessee of record. We'd had to move fast during the pandemic downturn, and to secure those properties with minimal red tape, Slate Bridge had needed a signatory. Legal didn't want to be liable. Finance didn't want to hold the bag, so I did it. I signed 5 commercial leases, all with my name, all with clauses most of these suits never bothered to read, including our prized downtown headquarters, the same one Vince liked to prance through in his slim-fit pants and knockoff Rolex. I didn't say a word that day. I just kept sipping, because the thing about coffee, it brews slowly. But once it's ready, it burns. 3 years ago, when the world was locking its doors and spraying countertops with vodka, Slate Bridge hit the panic button. Office space? Who needed it? Everyone was suddenly a floating head in Zoom purgatory, and the board started murmuring about downsizing physical assets. But I saw what was coming. I knew remote wouldn't last forever, and when the rebound came, commercial real estate would be a bloodbath. Prices would rise. Locations would vanish, and the companies that held ground in the storm, they'd own the damn battlefield, so I made a move. While the firm's leadership was busy Googling how to file for lease forgiveness, I was meeting with brokers over frozen Wi-Fi and shaky webcams, scouring distressed listings. I called in favors, whispered with landlords, made spreadsheet models so detailed they had formulas inside formulas. And when legal hesitated, because Slate Bridge wasn't willing to commit to 5 new leases with revenue in freefall, I offered a workaround. I'd sign them, personally, temporarily, just until the firm's cash flow stabilized and we could shift the contracts over. At the time, it felt tactical, calculated, heroic even. I remember the CFO giving me a stiff little nod over Teams. Appreciate you taking point on this, Lisa. The CEO didn't even reply. I didn't do it for praise. I did it because someone had to. Because when everyone else was running, I was building. That's what strategy is. You see the fire coming, and instead of screaming, you start laying bricks. The result? 5 prime commercial leases. 3 in metro hubs, 2 in strategic feeder cities. All negotiated by me, all approved by me. And thanks to legal dragging their feet post-pandemic, 3 of them, including our downtown HQ, were never formally reassigned to Slate Bridge. Still signed by one, Lisa R. Halden, the kicker. Every lease had a risk clause tucked in, a kind of fire escape nobody else noticed. Termination at lessee's discretion without cause with 30 days written notice. The brokers had laughed when I insisted on that line. You think you'll need to break the lease? One of them asked. Not me, I'd replied, but someone might need reminding who holds the keys. Now here we were. Vince, our shiny new VP, the human LinkedIn post, hadn't read a single contract. He He was too busy rebranding everything, turning conference rooms into ideation pods, and swapping out our vendor list for his old college roommate's startup. I watched him strut around headquarters like a rooster in borrowed feathers, clueless that the whole coop was standing on paperwork with my name on it. He mocked me about my office, about ambition, about visibility, but here's the truth. I didn't want the spotlight, I wanted leverage. Visibility gets applause. Leverage gets results, and buried in 3 dusty filing cabinets, 1 digital, 2 real, was all the leverage I needed, so I started digging. I pulled the lease PDFs from our cloud archive, cross-referenced them against the renewal schedules, printed the originals I kept stashed behind my bookshelves. My apartment turned into a war room of highlighters and post-it flags. Clause 7b, paragraph 14d, signatory page with my initials in blue ink. And the more I read, the more I remembered. I hadn't just signed these, I'd built them. Vince wouldn't understand that. Guys like him don't believe in foundations, just balconies and bullhorns, but a structure's only as safe as the steel inside it. And I'd embedded mine deep. He thought I was dead weight. Cute, what he didn't know was I was ballast. And the ship doesn't float without me. It started with a calendar invite that never came, then 2, then 5. I was used to being in the loop. Hell, I built the loop, but suddenly I was orbiting outside it, watching my old projects get handed off like party favors. When I finally asked Vince if there was a scheduling issue, he smiled like a crocodile in a koi pond. Oh, Lisa, did you get the memo? We're realigning roles. Too much on your plate. I thought you'd appreciate the relief. The relief, like he was doing me a damn favor. That week, I lost access to 2 budget folders I'd managed for years. When I logged into our project management tool, my admin privileges were gone. Instead, a new name had popped up at the top of Strategic Ops, Daryl. One of Vince's loyal little tagalongs, kind of guy who calls himself a thought architect and spends more time formatting decks than understanding what's in them. Daryl's first act as director? A pitch deck titled Future-Proofing Our Pipeline, Disruption by Design. He took a color gradient I made 3 years ago and slapped it on a timeline that didn't even make sense. And the board ate it up because Vince pitched it. Like a carnival barker selling glitter glue as gold dust. No mention of the legacy metrics. No attribution. Just buzzwords over bones I'd laid. The final straw came on a Wednesday. I got called into HR, not the carpeted corner office where actual problems are discussed, but the sterile white box where careers go to get softly euthanized. Lisa, said Miranda from HR, blinking too much, we're so grateful for your years of contributions. With the leadership restructuring, Vince has proposed a more internal-facing role for you. Less client intensity, more operational support. Support, I repeated. Think of it as repurposing your institutional knowledge, like I was a damn couch. They moved me to a different floor, smaller desk, no windows. I could practically hear the echo of my old self in that hallway, the version of me who used to walk past reception with a portfolio full of quarterly wins and a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. Now, silence, just the soft hum of recycled air and my name disappearing from every new initiative. But there's something Vince never learned in his fast track. MBA-sponsored climb to middle-tier mediocrity. People like me don't shout when we're angry. We catalog, we observe, and then we engineer the exit wound. So I opened my old contacts list, scrolled past vendors, consultants, execs long gone, and then I found her, Sandra Wallace, managing partner at Cresthold Realty. She'd been the one who negotiated our flagship leases with me during the 2020 panic. We'd bonded over shared insomnia, late-night calls, and passive-aggressive landlords. Sandra was smart, sharp, and most importantly, she remembered. I texted her, hey Sandra, got a sec to catch up, curious about the fine print on the 4406 lease. 3 dots, then a reply. Lisa, absolutely. Want to meet for coffee or something stronger? Coffee would do. The meeting was set for Friday. By Thursday night, I had unearthed every contract, amendment, renewal clause, and arbitration line tied to our downtown HQ. I didn't go in blind. I went in loaded. They thought they'd repurposed me. All they'd really done was give me the quiet and the time I needed to prepare. The coffee shop was one of those industrial chic places that smelled like burnt beans and ambition. Cement floors, exposed pipes, baristas with sleeve tattoos and existential dread. I got there early, not out of nervousness, but out of habit. 12 years in strategy teaches you how to arrive before the power shifts. Sandra swept in 10 minutes late wearing a trench coat that probably cost more than my entire week of groceries, eyes sharp and smile half-loaded. Lisa R. Halden, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Still saving companies from themselves. I gave a small laugh, trying not to get run over by the ones I already saved. She raised an eyebrow, then flagged the waiter. 2 espressos, hers with oat milk, mine with consequences. Once we got the pleasantries out of the way, who left where, who got promoted, who got indicted, we got down to it. I pulled out a red folder, not digital, paper, on purpose. There's a kind of reverence people give paper you don't get with a screen. I wanted to revisit the original lease on 4406 Grand, I said, laying it between us. Particularly Clause 14C, the discretionary termination clause. Sandra flipped through the pages like she already knew where to look. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. We'd both worked in the business long enough to know when a question was a pretext. This was about confirming weapons, not requesting advice. Her finger landed on the paragraph. There it was, exactly where I remembered. Termination may be executed without cause or board consent at lessee's discretion, with no less than 30 days notice. Lessee, Lisa R. Halden, not Slate Bridge, not the board, not the VP with the slick hair and inflated ego. Me. Sandra leaned back, eyebrows lifted. You're still the sole signatory, I nodded. Slate Bridge never executed the lease reassignment. It got pushed post-COVID, then forgotten. Well, she said, sipping her espresso, that's a hell of a knife to keep in the drawer. I didn't keep it, I said. They just forgot I had it. We sat in silence for a beat. Outside, people passed by the windows, consultants, interns, a man yelling at his AirPods. I used to envy those people. The ones who moved through life without having to build armor just to exist in a meeting. The ones who didn't have to smile through insults or be team players while their work was carved up and rebranded like supermarket rotisserie chicken. But today, I felt none of that. No envy, no rage, just a sharp, focused clarity. They moved me into a corner, I said quietly. Not a corner office, just a corner. Told me I'd be more efficient in a non-client-facing role. Sandra didn't laugh, she just nodded. So what are you thinking? I stared at the lease page a second longer, then closed the folder slowly. I'm thinking of reminding them who picked the damn building. Sandra's smile was subtle, almost surgical. Well then, let me know if you'd like us to prepare the formal withdrawal paperwork. Discretionary, after all. No rush, I said, standing. But soon, and as I walked out of that shop, coat slung over one arm, folder tucked under the other, I didn't feel like someone plotting revenge. I felt like someone finally returning the serve. Not with fireworks, not with fanfare, with a paragraph and a signature. Because sometimes the most dangerous sound in a power struggle is a pen clicking open. The invite landed in my inbox Thursday night. Subject line, quarterly vision, reset mandatory attendance. That's Vince speak for clear your schedule so I can hear myself talk. I already knew what it was about. The grapevine was humming louder than usual. Vince had finally wormed his way into a solo pitch to the board, his first unchaperoned performance. Rumor was he'd be unveiling his Vanguard rebranding initiative. That's what he called it, Vanguard, as if any of these clowns had seen the front line of anything other than a kombucha tasting at the Chamber of Commerce. Friday morning, I showed up early, not for Vince, but for myself, wearing my least exciting blazer. No mascara, hair in a knot. I wanted to blend into the wallpaper, and it worked. Vince didn't even glance at me as I took a seat in the back, just far enough from the table that I wouldn't register on the exec camera feed. He started his pitch like he always did, too loud, too confident, too full of jargon he didn't fully understand. I watched the board members nod politely as he introduced a 6-phase rollout strategy, each phase with some ridiculous name like Ignite, Amplify, or Transcend. You'd think we were launching a boy band, not managing commercial real estate assets. Then came the slides. The colors were familiar, the structure too, and that's when it hit me, he was using my old presentation deck. The one I built in 2021 when we locked in the secondary leases and expanded our footprint across 3 markets. He'd stripped out the nuance, butchered the data, and slapped his name on it like a child trying to pass off a forged permission slip. Slide 7 was the killer. A map of regional growth zones I'd spent 2 months modeling with a data team he didn't even know existed. He'd relabeled them Vince's expansion corridors. The man was standing on a mountain he didn't climb and declaring himself king of elevation. I said nothing. Just sipped my coffee, the same way I had the day of the corner office joke. But this time the taste was different. No bitterness, just the final sip before the cup goes empty. The board, to their credit, didn't seem blown away. There were a few polite questions. One executive, Sandra's ex-husband, if you can believe it, raised a brow at the revenue assumptions but let it slide. Vince closed with a quote from some leadership book he probably found on a bathroom stall. Everyone clapped, not because they believed him, because it was over. When the meeting adjourned, I didn't linger. No need. My role in the show was done. Let him think he won the audience. I wasn't there for applause. Back in my corner office, that is, the corner of the floor no one visits unless the copper breaks, I opened my red folder one last time. Found the lease for $44.06 grand. Pulled up the email template I drafted the night before. Subject line already filled in. Notice of lease termination discretionary clause 14. See, I reread the body twice. Straightforward, clean, legally bulletproof. I attached the signed letter, CC'd Sandra and the landlord's legal counsel, and stared at the send button for just a moment. And then I clicked it. There was no dramatic music, no thunderclap, just the quiet whoosh of corporate detonation. In 30 days, Slate Bridge's HQ would no longer be theirs. And Vince? He just pitched the future of a building he no longer had permission to enter. The thing about pulling a pin is, there's always that second of silence before the grenade knows it's time to blow. It was Monday morning when the email reached Mark Ferris, Slate Bridge's official real estate broker and human embodiment of khaki. I could practically picture his reaction, blinking twice, mouth slightly open, the spreadsheet on his second monitor forgotten mid-scroll. He'd probably assumed, like everyone else, that the lease was handled ages ago, that the building belonged to the firm. He didn't realize it still had my signature at the bottom, that it was my name, Lisa R. Halden, on the document sitting in his inbox. Mark wasn't stupid, just forgetful. We'd worked together during the acquisition sprint, back when downtown space was going for the price of a used Toyota and desperation made landlords generous. I remember him complimenting my foresight at the time, saying I played chess while the rest played checkers. Guess he forgot I don't just play, I tend to flip the board when I lose a queen. I didn't expect to hear from him directly, but I saw the calendar update just before lunch. Op Sync Agenda Edition, Mark Ferris to join. That wasn't standard. Neither was the 11 o'clock a.m. time slot, which just so happened to overlap with Vince's recurring vision alignment meetings, which he ran like a cult sermon, lots of buzzwords, lots of staring into the camera like it owed him something. I accepted the invite silently, flipped my camera off, and muted my mic. Let the theater begin. Vince was mid-diatribe when I joined, something about consolidating vendor relationships and transitioning out of legacy leases to lean into agility. The irony would have choked a weaker soul. Daryl nodded along like a bobblehead. Someone else complimented the naming logic on the internal building zones. Naming logic? The man called a copy room Innovation Cove. Then Mark's icon lit up. Hey all, he said, voice chipper in that fake casual tone brokers use when they're about to deliver bad news. I'll keep this quick, just wanted to address an urgent update regarding the 4406 Grand property, your current headquarters. Vince frowned but waved a hand. Go ahead, Mark. Mark cleared his throat. We received a signed lease termination notice on Friday evening. It's fully executed, compliant with Clause 14C. The 30-day clock started Saturday. The silence that followed was gorgeous. Pure, untouched. Vince blinked. Wait, what? Who authorized that? Mark's voice didn't waver. The lessee did. I'm the VP of Expansion, Vince barked. Nothing goes through without Mark cut in, smooth as butter on a hot day. According to our records and the lease on file, the official lessee is still Lisa R. Halden. There was no reassignment paperwork processed post-COVID. That authority never transferred. You could feel the moment Vince realized he'd been walking around in someone else's kingdom. The silence in the call stretched so long, I could hear someone nervously tapping a pen. And then Mark, bless him, dropped the line that lit the match. Oh, and per the landlord, I was asked to pass along a message. Tell the VP she's reclaiming her space. My coffee had gone lukewarm, but I sipped it anyway. Camera still off. No need to show my face. Not yet, let them stew. Let them scroll through contracts and dig through emails and hold 10 panic side meetings to confirm what Mark had just told them in under 90 seconds. That building, that polished temple of glass and ego, it was never theirs, it was rented. And the rent just came due. Mark didn't flinch, didn't sugarcoat, didn't hedge. He just said it like you say the time of day or order a sandwich. The landlord received the termination paperwork. You have 30 days to vacate. You could hear the oxygen get sucked out of the Zoom. Someone coughed. Someone else's Outlook pinged like it was trying to break the tension. Vince's face twitched somewhere between confused toddler and CEO meltdown. His mouth opened, ready to interrupt, to argue, to salvage the illusion of control. But Mark wasn't done. She also asked me to pass along a note, direct quote, tell the VP she's reclaiming her space. Words landed with all the grace of a dropped anvil. Vince froze mid-bluster. His mouth snapped shut. Eyes scanned the screen, desperate for an ally, for some executive to jump in and demand context or call it a prank or question the broker's credibility. But all he got were muted stares and one poor intern whose eyebrows had disappeared into her hairline. Then, almost as one, a few faces turned toward me. I didn't say anything, didn't unmute, just lifted my coffee and took a slow, unbothered sip. Camera still off. No need to perform. Let them wonder. Let them put it together on their own. Let the silence explain what I no longer had to. A few beats later, the legal counsel on the call, Martin, who hadn't said a word since joining, leaned forward and asked flatly, is this enforceable? Mark answered without hesitation. Yes. Clause 14C is crystal clear. Discretionary termination by the lessee with 30 days notice, no cause required. Signed, timestamped, and notarized. There's nothing to contest. Daryl, sweet, dim Daryl, muttered, but I thought we handled those lease transitions in 2021. I smiled faintly. You thought wrong. Vince's face was red now. Not the blush of embarrassment, no, this was rage. He opened his mouth again, but Mark didn't wait. I'll send the vacate timeline by EOD, he said. Efficient as ever. Move-out logistics start next week. Landlord expects a full exit by the 18th. And just like that, he logged off. Click, gone. The screen went quiet again. Vince stared at the spot where Mark's face had been like he could will him back with brute disbelief. I watched his jaw work like it was chewing on broken glass. Then finally, he snapped his head toward me. Lisa, not a question, not a greeting, just my name. Spat like it had betrayed him. I clicked on my camera, didn't speak. Just looked back at him, cool and calm, letting the silence stretch long enough to wrap around the entire call like a noose. Then softly, almost kindly, it's just a lease, Vince. He blinked, caught off guard by the softness. He wanted fireworks. I gave him a feather. I mean, I continued, letting the sarcasm drip like honey over arsenic. It's not like we need a downtown headquarters, right? I've been preaching virtual agility for months. Just think of it as a chance to lean in. No one laughed, but a couple people exhaled in that tight, guilty way people do when they know they're not supposed to enjoy the show, but damn, they needed it. I muted myself again, turned the camera off, and left the call. Let him scramble. Let him write memos. Let him dial legal and scream into a speakerphone about sabotage. Because this wasn't sabotage, it was correction. 12 years of bricks, of spreadsheets and risk maps and tenant negotiations, of being overlooked, underestimated, and talked over. All of it crystallized into one line of text in a forgotten lease, and now the building was mine to take back. Not for revenge, for restoration. By the time the sun set that evening, the executive Slack channel was a live-action panic attack. I didn't even have to scroll to feel the desperation radiating through the screen. Messages pinging faster than they could be answered. Threads breaking off into half a dozen private groups as everyone scrambled to solve a problem they didn't understand and never thought they'd have to. The CEO, William T. Griffin, who'd barely acknowledged my presence outside of annual reviews and awkward elevator rides, scheduled an emergency call with legal and HR that night. It was supposed to be confidential. It wasn't. You don't CC half the damn C-suite and expect silence. Who the hell authorized this lease termination? He barked, according to someone in facilities who happened to overhear the whole thing through a shared wall. We don't have authority. What do you mean we don't have authority? Legal tried to explain, calmly, repeatedly. The 2020 leases were executed under exceptional conditions. Emergency authorizations, short-staffed compliance, and most crucially, signed by the one person willing to step up when everyone else was hiding under desks or Zoom filtering their breakdowns. Me. Is her name still on it? Griffin asked. Yes, sir, came the answer. We never filed the reassignment paperwork. She remains the sole lessee of record for the 4406 Grand location. Under the terms of Clause 14C, she didn't need board consent. They pulled the original document from the archive. My signature, my date, my initials on every page, including the one Vince had skimmed at best and shredded at worst. That's when the tide turned. Vince, who'd apparently stormed into the CEO's office mid-call, tried to play it off like some Machiavellian ambush. This is sabotage, he claimed. She's weaponizing paperwork to retaliate. This has to be a violation of internal policy. But legal didn't bite. Neither did HR. Instead, they opened a side investigation, quiet but efficient. Turns out they'd received 3 formal complaints about Vince's behavior over the past 6 weeks. 2 anonymous. One from a junior strategist he'd berated in front of a client for not vibing with the new direction. She documented everything, dates, emails, even a recorded Teams call. Within hours, Vince's calendar was scrubbed clean. Access to shared drives, revoked. Executive assistant, reassigned. HR had him scheduled for behavioral review that Thursday. That's code for we're building a case and you won't see it coming. And me? I wasn't on any calls, didn't send a single email, didn't even break my lunch routine. Turkey wrap, 1 dill pickle, and a seltzer I opened with the calm of a woman watching dominoes fall, one by one, along a path she drew 3 years ago. People stopped by my desk throughout the day, quietly, casually, some pretending they needed printer paper just to get a look at me. A few smiled. One whispered, "Was that you?" I didn't answer, just looked at them like I didn't know what they meant. But by that evening it was clear the unraveling had begun. And the best part, I didn't lift a finger. I didn't leak a memo or crash a meeting or write a scorched earth email with bullet points and demands. All I did was follow the rules they ignored, execute the authority they gave me, and let the silence do what shouting never could. I didn't make Vince fall. I just stopped holding the net. The building felt quieter than usual, like it knew something sacred had shifted. Or maybe it was just emptier. Half the execs were suddenly working remotely, and the others kept their doors shut tighter than a confession booth. I took the stairs, not out of nostalgia, but because I didn't feel like sharing an elevator with whatever ghosts still lingered in HR's glass-walled aquarium. I wasn't supposed to be there, not officially. My role had become so internal-facing that no one even tracked my movements anymore, which was fitting, really, because I hadn't come for them. I came for me. 3rd floor. The scent of cheap coffee and stress lingered in the carpet. My heels clicked softly as I passed the corner office. His old domain. Vince's nameplate was gone, ripped off in a hurry. The door was ajar. Inside, boxes lined the wall, half filled with the remains of his performance, a stack of empty branded notebooks, a faux marble award for operational excellence, and a crumpled whiteboard sketch of some buzzword flowchart he never finished. I paused at the threshold, took in the view. Big windows, expensive chair. A monitor bigger than my first apartment's TV, but I didn't go in. I walked past it, down the corridor with the crooked ceiling tile and the buzzing light they never fixed. Toward the corner, not the coveted corner, just a corner. The space they assigned me back when I was too junior to protest, too hungry to care. And there it was, my old office, smaller, dimmer, a little dusty from disuse. But it felt familiar in the way a worn sweatshirt does, threadbare, comfortable, honest. I stepped inside. My desk was still there, different computer. Same scratches in the laminate from where I used to tap my pen during 14-hour strategy sessions. I ran my hand across the window frame. They'd replaced the blinds, but not the squeaky hinge on the top drawer. Some things, it seemed, didn't warrant an upgrade. And yet, this room had seen more of my real work than any other space in that building. It had absorbed my late nights, my early mornings, my triumphs, my breakdowns. Didn't care about power plays or rebrands or who had the biggest office. It just held what I gave it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. Lisa Halden, I answered. Miss Halden, this is Rachel from Cresthold Realty. Just confirming we've finalized the paperwork for the Midtown property. Your keycards will be delivered by Friday. We're excited to have you. I smiled. Thank you, Rachel. I'm excited too. Midtown, 12 floors up. Exposed brick. Windows that open. A clean slate. A new firm. Mine. I hung up and stood there for a moment longer, letting it all settle. Letting the echoes of the past fade under the weight of what I'd reclaimed, not with noise, not with fire, but with quiet, deliberate precision. They thought power was about who stood at the front of the room. But real power is knowing when to walk away, and knowing exactly what to take with you when you do. As I stepped out of that office, my old office, I didn't look back. There was nothing left to prove. They finally saw it now. The name that had been on the door the entire time was mine. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.